Very much, Ben. I will start. Thank you, Bernardo, for the invitation, the Johns Hopkins University, and so the Agency for Peace Building, of which we embrace actually the philosophy and the mission to promote conditions to enable the resolution of conflict, reduce violence, and contribute to a durable peace. It's strange, but actually I heard Mrs. Boni saying that she studied in Bologna, or she's from Bologna. Exactly, I've been studying here for years. I've never entered this building. And it's kind of really nice to be here. So thank you for this invitation. The focus of today's discussion is reimagine actually the prevention. And this is in line with what the European Union is currently doing. So it's a process, it's ongoing. I will try to guide you through our world, which is not easy to understand from outside. And we are not the best in communicating that. So I'll try to be very open with you, and I hope to have questions at the end, because I'm open to questions as well. So this is a forum, this is what Bernardo highlighted at the very beginning. I'm happy to take your questions at the end. So, conflict prevention. It evolved from halting disputes and their violent escalation, but it evolved, let's say, into something else. The avoidance of the outbreak, the escalation, the recurrence, and the continuation of the violent conflict. I will share with you this presentation at the end. You will have it will be edited, of course, for this purpose, but you will have some references just to have the picture of the European Union policy framework. In case of questions, just let me know. You will have my contact as well. So let's start. It's kind of a guided tour, if you wish. Stay with me and stop me if something is not clear. So as Ben said, we are working a lot with EPLO also in Brussels, our partner organization, civil society. So they know more or less what we are doing, but I'll try to guide you. No. Okay, so now it's working. Okay. So at the level of the European Union, we have tried to put together, and with successful results, an integrated approach to external conflict and crisis. This is where now I'm working, but I come basically from a different world, which was the conflict prevention and mediation division. I will show you this in a sec. So I've been on the ground. I've done, let's say, my starting point in my career was really the human rights, then the development. Then I turned into the EEAS, which is the European External Action Service, the diplomatic service of the European Union. And now, after a period of 6 years in the conflict prevention division, I'm now working with the Secretary General of this diplomatic service, and we are trying together with him to tackle the different crises with this integrated approach. So there was an evolution of our EU policy framework. I told you it's work in progress, but we did a lot of steps forward already. So we started in Maastricht, then there was the security strategy in 2003. We had the Lisbon Treaty, very well known, in 2009. The EEAS, my institution that works hand in hand with the European Commission and the European Parliament, was created in 2011. And then finally, we had the creation of the comprehensive approach. I will show you the difference between the comprehensive and the integrated approach to crisis in 2013. And finally, the global strategy. Why it is important? This guy in the picture is Borrell. It's our leader in terms of diplomacy. And the EU global strategy is important, and it's meaningful for the European Union and for the world in general, because in there we state that the European Union will engage in a practical and principled way in peace building and foster human security. Going back to what Mrs. Boni was saying, we are all human beings, and this is at the center of our interests. through an integrated approach. What is the integrated approach? It looks like confusing, right? Because it's multidimensional. I'll tell you more, but you can say that you have different plans. You have diplomacy, you have political dialogue, you have humanitarian assistance. In practical terms, Director General for humanitarian assistance is DG ECHO, development cooperation, the sanctions, very well known nowadays because of the Ukrainian crisis. Common security and defense policies is where I'm coming from. Conflict prevention. So conflict prevention is just a small part of the whole, let's say, integrated approach. So knowing conflict prevention and having working for conflict prevention, I can tell you, is not enough. So it's the basis of everything, but is not enough. And then you have the financial instruments, trade, etc. So that's what I was mentioning before. It's an engagement, the integrated approach, towards a political objective. That could be, for example, stopping violence for the aggression from Russia to Ukrainians. So it's multidimensional, it's multi-level, multi-phased, and multilateral. It sounds very complicated, but it's not in practical terms. What happens when a crisis erupts? This is what we do, actually, and this is what is the ongoing process that we are trying to put in a framework that is easy to understand. So the integrated approach is building on the achievements of the European Union comprehensive approach. So you have a toolbox, right? So the European Union has a range of options. It's not only one. You can play with the different options. And so you have the diplomatic actions, like I said, economic sanctions. Then you have the military response. So it's a CSDP activity. What does it mean? It means security policy, common security policy and defense, of course. Then you have the development aid, the humanitarian assistance. What we hear during the press reviews, etc., is the humanitarian corridors. This is part of the integrated approach. Conflict prevention measures and trade, climate, etc., other different aspects of the crisis. So we have this political framework from crisis approach. I lost the, here, sorry. So why is that different and why it is a progress in comparison to the comprehensive approach? Because we have a dedicated structure that I will show you later. I'm part of the structure to promote this integrated approach. You have more interaction with the member states. We are in touch with all the member states at the level of the parliament, European Parliament, of course. Then it's not restricted to a formal reporting mechanism, but is more an exchange. And then you have an emphasis on the mindset exchange. So this is what happened. I'm missing one slide, I guess. Oh no, it's here, sorry. I'll go back. So there was an evolution and something was created. And I had the pleasure to be part of this creation. We created the Integrated Approach for Security and Peace Directorate. And what is the purpose of this directorate within our structure, diplomatic structure, is to ensure effective coordination of our response at the level of the European Union throughout the entire conflict cycle. So from the prevention, so from the early warning system to the horizon scanning, to the political strategic planning for crisis management and response. And also we take care of the security. We are tackling, for example, the responsibility to protect people on the ground. So this is how it looks like. This is our structure. And I'm part, there is no pointer, but actually the integrated approach, it's on your left side of the screen. As you can see, there are different layers. You have the conflict prevention and mediation cell. Then you have a strategic planning for the missions, because we not only have embassies of the European Union around the world, but we also have missions and operations. It means that we have militaries on the ground and operational people on the ground around the world. We have 13, I guess. And the European Peace Facility, now very well known because we are giving our support to the crisis, to the Ukrainian crisis, through the European Peace Facility, which is a new instrument that the European Union has at its disposal. So you can see there is a big structure. There is the Deputy Secretary General, which is at the head of the structure. And then there are different pillars. So you have the integrated approach, within which we have the conflict prevention one. Then you have the security and defense policy, the civilian planning, and then you have the military stuff. We are, above all this, with the Secretary General, dealing with the whole crisis, which is interesting because when you spend 6 years of your life in doing conflict prevention and mediation, you can socialize high-level people, political people, with the idea that conflict prevention matters, really matters, and mediation is at the core of it as well. So this was interesting. And then we had, in comparison to the comprehensive approach, we had kind of an increasing integration of the different layers. So we started from the very basics. We started from sharing information, which is not to be taken for granted, actually. Then we shared our analysis, conflict analysis, because this is where we start from, right? The conflict analysis and the assessment of the actors on the ground in the different countries. Then you have shared priorities. What are our priorities as the European Union? They are certainly different from the priorities of a member state, a single member state. Then you have to identify complementarities with other member states, with actors on the ground. And then you have a joint implementation of the plan that we do all together. How we do that? We have our toolbox. So I share with you some examples. Bernardo told me, do examples. I'll do examples, Bernardo. So how we do that? Through our early warning system, EU early warning system. It's now more inclusive. We revised the whole process and we translated it into concrete early actions. So it's not only technical stuff, it's really hands-on approach. So I will explain you more later, but just to give you some examples. Then we have a humanitarian development and political nexus. This is a link to basically between or among different disciplines, which are the humanitarian, the development, and the policy. And it helps a lot in operationalizing, of course, what we are planning. Then there is a new concept of stabilization, a new concept on mediation. You will find all this information on in our website, which is broadening the spectrum of stabilization actions, like in the Sahel, was mentioned before. And then we have a joint conflict analysis, which is a new requirement under the NDC program. I know it's not talking to you probably, but it's a new program going from 2021 to 2027. I will show you a slide later on this. So there was an evolution for sure. And what are our tools to continue evolving, let's say, in this process? So we have new concepts to address the drivers of the conflict, for example, the climate change, which is central to us. And we have new ways of working. So we have this NDC, which is a financial instrument of the European Commission to address better security development nexus. And then we have the European Peace Facility, which is an instrument of budget done by the member states to cover operational action, not only at the level of the embassy, so the delegation, but more on the military and defense aspects. So this is NDC. It's kind of huge measure. We are talking about 79 billion euros. And how you can see that it's divided into geographic, thematic, and rapid response pillar. The rapid response, it was what we used for the Ukrainian crisis. I'll go back if you have questions, but this is about the European Peace Facility. So you have assistance measures and military operations. You start, it's like a cycle. You have capacity building, you have civilian and military missions, and this is kind of what we call integrated approach, hands-on approach. Why that? Because it's completely new and we mix different aspects of the crisis. So we start with the conflict prevention. We do an analysis with the conflict analysis, and then we start financing what is best for the country, for example, Ukraine. I'll show you later, because otherwise I'll talk too much and Ben will be upset with me. Methodology. New methodology. EU actors are divided into the most important areas: security sector reform, so SSR as written, DDR, demobilization, stabilization, human security, development for concepts like mediation, climate change, and security, and then developing a knowledge management capability for the integrated action in conflict prevention. What is the implementation? How we do that? Through the exercises. So we have people working through the whole year in planning and conduct exercise that put us in the situation of a real war. And we have trainings as well. Then we have a coordination with the crisis response mechanism. And then we have guidance on crisis response instruments, like I showed you before the slide on the European Peace Facility. Then I did something wrong. Yes. This is an example in Mozambique. Okay, let's take Mozambique as an example. So how we operationalize the integrated approach. We did an analysis, a conflict analysis in 2021, and we presented it to all the member states. So what we analyzed, everything basically: political aspect, diplomatic aspect, humanitarian, peace building, security, the actors, the development actions in the medium and long term, with the focus on addressing human rights and rule of law. So what did we do? We had a diplomatic and political response. We had doubled our amount to be spent in Mozambique from 7 million to 16.5 million euros. We supported the peace building projects, so not only at the grassroots level, but also at political level. We supported the security. So we established a non-executive mission, CSDP mission, Security and Defense Mission. European Peace Facility, we gave money basically to give assistance, and we supported the counterterrorism efforts. And then we had also a leaflet, let's say, on development and cooperation. So we supported youth, green transition, governance, peace building, and stability. And we had also a part on recovering and peace building through the World Bank, for example. So this is in DICI, explicitly on Mozambique. This is how we use this financial instrument of the European Commission in the different aspects: geographical, thematic, and rapid response. Don't kill me, Ben. No, okay. Instruments beyond this Indici program. We have the EPF, we have, so the European Peace Facility, sorry, the CSDP, Common Security and Defense Policy, and the counterterrorism and security experts. So we have the humanitarian assistance, then we have non-executive trainings, as we said before, and the EPF granting non-lethal equipment. So to build the capacity of the Mozambican security forces, for example. So trainings and non-lethal harms. Okay. Then this is the core of our forum today. What is at the basis of a good, let's say, integrated approach is a conflict analysis. So for conflict prevention, we need good analysis. How we do that? It's a structured process, but it's flexible as well because it depends a lot on the actors on the ground. It's interactive. I will tell you a bit more later. And what we identified during this process are the conflict risks and dynamics and the options for conflict prevention. And then, of course, we rely a lot on peace and conflict theory that we are trained on during the whole year in different parts of the world. So this is a conflict curve, right? And you have at the very beginning stable peace, and where we come it's into the preventive diplomacy with conflict prevention and mediation, which is not mentioned, but is part as well of this, of course. Then you go up, there is, of course, a limit to the violence. And when really the violence erupts, then you have the crisis diplomacy that has to play a role, of course, and the crisis management plays a role. And then you have the peacemaking. So the curve goes down, you have peace enforcement, peacekeeping, and then the post-conflict and peace building. So you can see that we can act at the early stage with the conflict analysis and the integrated approach, but also in the middle of the conflict and also afterwards. So you can apply this concept throughout the whole process. So how is that done, this conflict analysis screening? Is done, of course, you have some principles. It's joint. Joint means with partners. Then it's inclusive because we ask different actors to participate into the analysis. So it's a civil society, the member states, local authorities on the ground. Then it's evidence-based, means that we do an analysis based on statistics, and it's interactive. So we do at the very end, it's not a forum, but it's a kind of discussion. It's kind of a discussion with the main actors. So what is new is that for this measure to be put in place to finance this kind of thing, Indici, this big measure that we put forward, has as a requirement a conflict analysis, which was not the case before. This is new. So the conflict analysis is a requirement to finance something on conflict prevention. So there is, the conflict analysis has 3 steps: the planning, then you have the analysis, and then you have the outreach. So the planning, how do we do that? We go on site, so we do a mission, a scoping mission. Then we do a literature review, what is already existing on this topic. And then you also have external consultant to have at least a frame on what is there already. Then we do the proper analysis, how we analyze the conflict drivers and the stakeholders, the conflict scenarios, the conflict sensitivity assessment, and actionable recommendations for the country specifically. And then finally, we have the outreach with the validation of the report, a final report, and the dissemination. This is a grid for the conflict drivers. It's very long to explain, but I just wanted to show you how it works in real terms. What is for security, political, rule of law, economic, social, and environment, and climate change. So this is the grid of the different conflict drivers. And then we have another one on conflict triggers. Since I don't have the time to explain you in details, I'll go there in the next phase with the questions, but I would like to show you something. This is the map, for example, of conflict actors and the stakeholders map. So we map the primary, secondary, and tertiary actors. Then we have the perpetrators, mobilizers or spoilers of the conflict resolution. And this is very useful also for the mediation concept. And then you have to identify what are the positions of the different actors, the interests and the needs, which are really different sometimes from what it appears, from what you hear, for example, the TV or journals, etc. So this is kind of the most important part of our process. And this is our toolbox. So what the EU has at its disposal as a toolbox. We have the early warning system, we have sanctions, we have the mapping of violence on the spot, because we have SATSEN, who is working with the intelligence service. So we have this at our disposal, and we have ceasefire support on the spot. This is at the level of security and defense. Then we go into the political level and diplomatic level, where you have, of course, the political dialogue at a different level with the preventive diplomacy, and you have strategic communication and public communication or diplomacy. Then you have the counterterrorism and countering disinformation and data collection. Then you have the development part, which is basically human rights monitoring, peace education, aid conditionality, humanitarian assistance, economic and financial measures, and then finally the climate, environment, and natural resource. Early warning system, I touch on this quickly, I promise, and then I'll give you the very quickly. What is the early warning system, which is different from an horizon scanning? It's an evidence-based risk management tool that identifies, assesses, and helps prioritize situations at risk of violent conflict only for non-EU countries, so outside Europe, focusing on structural factors and with a time horizon of 4 years. So from 0 to 4 years, we can determine more or less what it could be the next war coming. So, and it identifies conflict prevention and peace opportunities, of course, but we don't have the crystal ball. It's not a prediction tool. It's always difficult, of course, to predict exactly the trigger and where it will come up the next crisis, but it can help, which is different from an horizon scanning, which has a different kind of horizon from 0 to 6 months. But it really helps in the assessment and in the upstreaming of the conflict. I would like to show the last one. Give me a second. No, I wanted to, yeah, exactly. Sorry. I wanted to show you something, but I cannot find it. Yes, how it goes. So basically, once we have identified a list of countries where we think a crisis can erupt, we do an inter-service meeting with other institutions. So the Commission, the Council, so member states are present, etc. We determine a list of countries. So conflict prevention, it's really at the core of our business. And then we do an information meeting with the member states, sharing this list with member states, which is approved. And then we can work on this country, doing a mission, and then we do our recommendations to avoid that this can erupt in a real crisis. So we work a lot upstream and not downstream. That is for me, but I have lots of things to say. So please come in with questions if you wish at the end.